Let me tell you the story of how China ended up owning aircraft carriers. Before the dissolution of the Soviet Union, Ukraine was a part of it and contributed significantly to Soviet military industries, including the manufacturing of aircraft carriers. One such carrier was named Varyag. However, when the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, everything ground to a halt, including the construction of the Varyag, which was about 70% complete. Ukraine, now independent, was plunged into severe economic hardship after separating from the Soviet Union, which had previously funded everything. Desperate for money, Ukraine began looking for assets to sell, and among them was the Varyag, which was almost complete except for final touches. Despite being nearly ready, no one wanted to buy it. Countries without the technology to build aircraft carriers couldn't finish the project, and those that could already had their own and didn't see the need to buy. However, China had its eyes on the carrier. At the time, the Chinese military was relatively weak, especially in naval capabilities, while the U.S. had emerged as the dominant global power. Fresh from World War II victories and nuclear bombings of Japan, American intelligence closely monitored China, ensuring it couldn't enhance its military capabilities by acquiring the carrier. By 1998, 7 years after the Soviet collapse, the Varyag was deteriorating, essentially rusting in place. Then came a businessman from Ukraine expressing interest in buying it. But this wasn't just any businessman. He claimed to be from Macau, a region in China known for gambling, nightlife, and cabaret clubs. He said he wanted to buy the carrier to convert it into a floating nightclub or casino. Initially, both the Ukrainian government and U.S. intelligence doubted his intentions, but after background checks, they found he genuinely operated a company in Macau dealing in nightlife and entertainment. Notably, Chinese businessmen had previously purchased Soviet warships to repurpose them for tourism, so the claim seemed plausible. He offered $20 million for the carrier, a mere fraction of its value, arguing the cost of towing it would exceed its price. Despite doubts, Ukraine agreed to sell, and the businessman began towing the carrier to China. However, he encountered major obstacles, such as passing through the Bosphorus Strait in Turkey. Turkey was reluctant to allow a non-operational carrier to pass due to the risk of it getting stranded and blocking the strait, much like the Ever Given incident in the Suez Canal. After years of negotiations, bribes, and fees, the carrier finally passed through the Bosphorus. When it reached the Suez Canal, Egypt also refused passage, as the carrier's engines weren't functional. This forced China to take a much longer route around the Cape of Good Hope. By the time the carrier arrived in China in 2002, over a decade after initial interest, the cost of towing, transit, and other expenses had ballooned to $120 million. Here's where the twist comes in. The so-called businessman from Macau was later revealed to be a Chinese intelligence officer. The entertainment company he established was a cover to facilitate the carrier's purchase without arousing suspicion. Once in China, the Navy began refurbishing the carrier, a process that took a decade, 2002 to 2012. Initially, it was used for training. In 2012, the Varyag was renamed Liaoning, and by 2018, it had been upgraded for full operational use. By 2022, the Japanese military reported that the Liaoning was conducting military operations in the East China Sea. This story highlights how geopolitical maneuvering and strategic patience allowed China to turn a decaying carrier into a cornerstone of its naval capabilities. Final thought: given the ongoing U.S. China rivalry, do you think China will surpass the U.S. in hypersonic missile technology, or will America solidify its dominance through advancements in laser weaponry?